And when I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
And if we're talking tight ends and we're going into round 2, maybe round 3, give me Ian Thomas, please. Let's just do the damn thing.
Just based on giving his overall ability. Again, I like his arm. I think he can make every throw.
The pick at number 12 is in.
Welcome to Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast. I am Russell Brown. We are back at it again. This is episode, I believe, 104, which is pretty wild. This is like my, I think, 80th or 85th episode of this show. So I'm quite pleased to be back in the lab. And, of course, alongside me, as always, CP Christian Page. My man, how we doing?
I'm doing well. I'm hot, but I'm good.
Is it warm down there?
Is like 92 degrees warm.
Yeah, that's pretty warm.
I'm not in Florida, so I'm not going to complain. And my AC's working. I have a lot of friends and family. Their ACs have gone out. I'm just going to not say anything else. I'm going to knock on wood and just keep going.
You're going to go see that movie tonight, and you know what's going to happen. You're going to come back, no AC.
God, that would be the worst. Yeah, going to see Child's Play,
Yep.
kind of the remastered version of Chucky the doll. And so, yeah, I'm going to come home with no AC, and then I'm going to have to worry about, some doll peeking around the corner. And my day would just get worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, you're going to be sleeping in the truck is what you're going to be doing with the AC going.
That's not a bad idea. If it comes to that, but I'm sure there's some car scene where it will make me, avoid that situation.
Yeah, with Child's Play, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Then that's crazy. And like we were saying before the show, I didn't even have a clue that they were remaking that movie. I feel like I've seen a commercial or two, but I was just like, oh, whatever. It's probably a Snickers commercial, and I kept on going. But
the voice of Chucky is actually Mark Hamill, also known as Luke Skywalker. So you may get some interesting people just wanting to watch the movie just for his sake. So really interesting. Mark Hamill, even though it seems like he's always gone away from after the Star Wars route, but pretty much every single animated Joker has been voiced by Mark Hamill. So Mark Hamill's making his way as a voice actor and also making his, royalty checks from Luke Skywalker in Star Wars.
Who's Luke Skywalker?
Don't even go there. You're going to go – you haven't been to a movie in a while. You're going to go see the new Star Wars movie in December. I'm going to make you.
No, I'm just kidding. I know who he is, but I'll be honest. I have not watched a Star Wars movie since I was probably 5 years old, and I just have no interest of ever watching it. At 5, I had no idea what was going on. My aunts and uncles would turn it on so we would shut up and sit downstairs in the basements while they were all upstairs playing cards. You know what I mean? I have no idea what anything is in Star Wars except for I know what Darth Vader is, but I don't know. This is a whole sidebar conversation. There's so much about it that I don't know. It's bad.
Well, you can get back into it. To be honest, though, the 3 Star Wars movies you have seen are probably the best ones, so you haven't missed a lot.
Yeah. Well, that's good then, I guess. But I just don't really have the interest to go do it. But I do have interest to talk football, and that's what we're going to do. So let's jump into this. We've got quite a bit of things that we want to talk about before you get out of here and enjoy that movie, because I kind of want to go see a movie now. I'm not going to lie. I want to talk. Yes, I want to talk quarterbacks. I want to talk about the Georgia offense, and I've got a message to Georgia fans out there that like to create fake Twitters about me, which I'm honored actually and very privileged. Thank you. And then we'll talk briefly about some summer scouting that we've been doing and some players that have been catching our eye over the last week or so. And it'll be a lot of fun. But let's start with the quarterbacks. We have not really done any quarterback stuff, and really we've been away since the 2019 NFL draft. I believe we've had maybe 2 episodes since that. So we're slacking on our end, but we're doing, again, a ton of film work. We're writing content, which, of course, you guys can check out over at cover1.net. Become a premium subscriber today. We've got content plans ranging from $5 to $20. And I will tell you the $20 month or the $20 yearly plan is the way to go. And, of course, as well, download the Cover One app. It's free to download. It's free to search. It's very simple. Search Cover One in your app store and download it today. So let's start with quarterbacks. Let's go with who we think as of right now will be, and maybe it's still a little early, but who are maybe the top two consensus quarterbacks that we're thinking? I mean, I'm thinking it's Justin Herbert from Oregon and Tua from Alabama. I'm not going to say the last name. I will never say that on this broadcast, ever, ever, ever. I will butcher it, and I will probably say it when we get to the draft. But and that's assuming that both guys are in the draft and everything else. But is it fair to say that these are the two guys that are the top two quarterbacks that we're paying attention to this year?
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And just looking at these two guys, it's kind of really hard to find some major flaws when it comes to just on-field presence. And, I mean, with Tua Tagovailoa, with his injury history and some, with Jalen Hurts having to come in and win the Georgia SEC championship game with him, or with Alabama with him, and then Tua just kind of dealing with some injuries throughout the season. Of course, the frame questions come up to play. Justin Herbert, he struggles a little bit with consistency. I know last year we talked about it before he made his decision to come back and ultimately play with his brother in the hometown team. That's pretty much his decision why he came back. His brother was in this past year's recruiting class for Oregon. But you talked about Herbert's lower body. His base is just a little inconsistent. And so if he can work on that, but I think upper body mechanics, his accuracy, his intelligence, anticipation, I think it's all there really for both of these guys. And sure, Tua throws to a lot of wide open receivers based on play action fakes, and he's really good when plays break down, and his improvisational skills are near elite if you want to go that far. But I think both of these guys are probably the cleanest guys going forward when you're just looking at, hey, who's going to go out here and win me a game? And then we can worry about, the height, weight, and little mechanical, little subtleties throughout the rest of the draft process. But I'm pretty sure these are the two best guys in college football right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's not like a lot of flaws with them. I mean, Herbert worries me a little bit with like the injuries that he's been going through, but I mean, he shows resiliency. He shows to get back on the field. He is a smart kid. That's one of the big reasons to why he's back at Oregon. I think that's important. I mean, he wants to get his degree. Again, he's a smart guy. He does struggle, I think, at times just getting that tunnel vision and not going through those progressions and trusting through them. But Tua is certainly the guy that I'm locked in on. I mean, I think this guy is got that electric, dynamic playmaking ability, kind of like Kyler Murray, but obviously he's a lot bigger than Kyler Murray. I think, it'll be interesting to see if they ever bring back that quarterback like all-star challenge thing that they used to do around like the Pro Bowl, where they would have basically like a competition who could throw it the farthest, who could be the most accurate, like Brett Favre's throwing 80-yard lasers out there. Like, it would be great to see Tua against Kyler Murray like in 2 years in the NFL doing it with Josh Allen and maybe even Tyree Jackson and other guys as well. But like, just overall, I think those are the two guys that are really just separating themselves in this class and in this group. It wouldn't be surprising if these are the top two guys when it's all said and done, just because of their dynamic ability. But two guys that I think are probably next in line would be KJ Costello from Stanford and Jake Fromm from Georgia, and I'm sure we'll talk briefly about both guys. So do you have a take on either one of those guys, or do you have maybe another two players or quarterbacks in mind rather than those two?
Yeah, for quarterbacks, I kind of put them on the back burner. I just kind of get the nitty-gritty because there's a lot – I mean, their film's a lot more accessible. There's a lot more chatter and everything. So I kind of put them on the back burner. But obviously, living in Alabama, Jake Fromm, only a couple hours away in Athens from me. So I've got to see him in person play last year, and he's pretty impressive. I know there's some things physically that he may struggle with. I think some consistency. He's really not consistently accurate, in my opinion. I know there's some plays, on the sidelines where he throws a beautiful back shoulder pass. I think that's just in a Georgia quarterback's blood, because Aaron Murray to David Green to even DJ Shockley and Joe Cox, they could all master the back shoulder throw. So I guess that's just in the Georgia Bulldog quarterback blood. But going forward, I think sometimes he's a little more inconsistent on the deep passes and just some of the layup throws. And I think sometimes you take that for granted. Kind of reminds me of Drew Lock, maybe not as strong of an arm, but some of those lower body mechanical issues, I think, will highlight some of his misses throughout the rest of his college career at Georgia. But I still think, from a projection standpoint, I think he checks the boxes physically from the physical makeup standpoint. But I think the more and more reps he gets, the more and more comfortable I'll feel going forward with him. KJ Costello, the only thing I've really broke down from him was just watching JJ Arcega-Whiteside a year ago. Right. Costello would put it right on the money. And even if he didn't, Arcega-Whiteside was going to go up and pluck it out of the air. So that's pretty much the only thing I've seen from him. But, I always talk about guys making big boy throws. Costello makes a lot of those big boy throws. It'll be interesting to see how that changes maybe with Arcega-Whiteside now in the league. But I think Costello got a lot of good looks last year when scouts were there just watching Stanford's talent as a whole. Bryce Love, another one, a couple of defenders. But I think going forward, Costello has made the right moves going forward, and I think he could really be set for a good year. But a couple other guys, I'll go quickly, just a couple names. Sam Ehlinger from Texas. Talk about a physical guy, more of that runner, but the guy I think I talk about big boy throws. He will stand in the pocket and take a lick as long as it means he's going to complete an accurate pass thrown to one of the better receivers, Colin Johnson, at Texas as well. So I think going forward, Sam Ehlinger is another guy to pay attention. And I'm just going to have to keep my eye on Shea Patterson from Michigan. Not a big fan. He's not a big fan whatsoever. There was a reason why he transferred, in my opinion. It wasn't just because the postseason ban. Jordan Ta'amu was actually really solid at Ole Miss. So Shea Patterson's a guy that I'm not sold on. Jake Bentley, he does not have an NFL arm whatsoever. Jalen Hurts is also intriguing, along with Jacob Eason, new schools, and I think they have a lot of physical talent. So those are just a couple names, or a few names that I'm looking forward to for this 2019 college football season.
I will say this. If Lincoln Riley gets Jalen Hurts to be the first overall pick of the 2020 NFL Draft, I will be putting Lincoln Riley as my president for the 2020 election. That will be on my vote. I will be voting other, and I will be writing his name down. I swear by it. That would be insane. But, going back to KJ Costello, and I like a lot of the names that you mentioned. The only one that I really disagree with is Shea Patterson. I think a lot of it is because last year and really 2 years ago, he showed so much of like a panic almost every single time he was under center.
He could not improv. Like I was just saying about Tua. Tua can do a lot of things on his feet. Shea Patterson, when something breaks down, it is game over.
It's game over, but also Tua's got the arm strength and the ball placement to really make –
and the intelligence in general.
Yeah, and to make any throw. And Shea just doesn't have that. And maybe he develops it this year. And since we're talking about guys in the state of Michigan, we might as well talk about Brian Lewerke. And of course, folks, we will go deeper into the quarterbacks as the year goes on and probably as the summer goes on. But it really circles back to Jake Fromm. But I will say Brian Lewerke is another name as well. Maybe he stands out for Michigan State this year. Maybe he gets right. He really hasn't been right since he hurt his shoulder. And really suffered a concussion. He suffered a concussion. He hasn't been the same quarterback since. But he's got a talented receiver in Cody White. Their run game's non-existent, but they've made some changes to their offensive staff. Dave Warner's not calling the plays anymore. So hopefully it really works out for him and they get it fixed. And Brian Lewerke takes the steps that he's supposed to be taking because he has some nice touch on some passes and he makes some pretty good throws and accurate reads. So it'll be nice to see what he does moving forward. But as far as KJ Costello, built like out of a quarterback factory almost. I think he's definitely a better version of Daniel Jones. And I think he's probably not as athletic as Daniel Jones, but just far more accurate football. Maybe he had one of the more quiet junior seasons last year with completing over 65% of his passes, had over 3,500 yards. I want to say he had 30 touchdowns to 11 or 12 interceptions, so a pretty good touchdown to interception ratio. But he just looks like a prototypical quarterback out there, tall in the pocket, looks strong in the pocket. When the pocket collapses, he doesn't really pressure himself and gets crazy. He sticks in the pocket. He does well. And I'm glad you brought up Ehlinger as well. I don't want to say he's Carson Wentz, but don't you kind of look at him and you just get –
Ooh, I like that, yeah.
Don't you get a little Carson Wentz vibe with him? That's what I get. I don't know what it is. I think maybe some of it's just with the athletic ability and the toughness and the grit when he runs. Now, I'm not saying he's got Carson Wentz, arm or or the intelligence, because he misses a lot of throws. There's a receiver from there, Devin Duvernay, who I talked about briefly last night or this morning in a column that I put together this week in scouting for the first week of summer. And I talk a little bit about Tyler Johnson from Minnesota, Zunaga, or however you say his name, from Florida, the edge rusher, and then you've got Devin Duvernay as well. So there's a ton of guys as well, but the one guy circling it back to is Jake Fromm, as far as this kind of second-tier quarterback for the 2020 NFL Draft. And I will say it definitely lit a spark in the Georgia fan Twitter world. I'm sure you saw that a little bit. It was.
Did you enjoy your lake house though?
I did. It was a lot of fun. Look.
That's all I care about.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, and you're more than welcome to come up anytime you want. You can catch a flight, and I'll pick you up from the airport. I live about 30 minutes away from it. I'll get you from there, and we'll get you up north. Or you can drive up here yourself. I don't know how far it is, but enjoy the ride. But no, and I'm not one to do this on Twitter. I don't gloat what I own. I don't gloat what I do. I'm a very calm, cool, collected guy for the most part. I like to break down a lot of film. I like to talk about football. And I've got game notes here to my right in my little yellow notebook of Jake Fromm, quarterback, Georgia, versus LSU. He's forcing passes to draw penalties. That was the first thing that I noticed. And then at the 15-23 mark, nice maneuvering in the pocket, low throw on the check down. 16:47 into the film, stares down the right side. Hardman is wide open on the left side. So that's him stuck in his initial read, not going anywhere else, not going through his progressions. I've got some other spots where he's going on these maybe back shoulder throws or corner routes, and it's not really there. But then you go to other games against Florida, does a really good job. 15:04, very accurate with the crossers, which, by the way, on his pros, he makes a lot of the throws that other quarterbacks can't make. He can push the ball vertically down the field. He hits post routes pretty well. He does a nice job in the pocket maneuvering around, accurate with throws across the middle of the field. Cons, doesn't always go through progressions, struggles versus pressure, struggled against LSU and the blitzes that they sent his way. So, again, those are just some notes on him. And, Twitter just blew up on a guy that I didn't even say I disliked. I just mentioned one game, and it's just – I heard this stuff, and I'm reading it, and I'm like, dude, I'm just going to have fun with this because this is not me. I don't – nobody cares that I own a lake house. But being that you're being this – I don't know, being a dick, people are being dicks to me. I'm like, well, I'll be right back. So let's do this thing. So, as far as Jake Fromm goes, it's not really so much him. There's times that, like I mentioned, he's not going through progressions, inaccurate in certain spots, but he did complete 67% of his throws. But fun fact here, people, and this is the next question, and we'll get into some questions and then pretty much wrap it up here. But what's going to happen with this Georgia offense? I mean, seriously, what is going to happen? Because here's a fun fact. Georgia, over the last 3 months, has lost receivers and tight ends that have compiled a total of 155 receptions. Jake Fromm completed 207 receptions last year, or 207 passes. So we're talking about, I don't know. Let me pull out my phone and let me do this quick math for you. 155 divided by 207. He's losing almost 75% of his offensive production because Riley Ridley, gone. Mecole Hardman, gone. Isaac Nauta, gone. Terry Godwin, gone. Oh, and by the way, yesterday, Jeremiah Holloman dismissed from the team. So what's going to happen with this team? You don't have Elijah Holyfield anymore. You have DeAndre Swift, but that's about it. And when you look at this roster, it's not like, you're going to sell me on Demetrius Robertson. I'm sorry. You're not going to do it. Who are you going to sell me on? Matt Landers, a 6'5", 200 pounds redshirt sophomore? Maybe. I mean, they've got a lot of receivers on the roster. Reed Tulowitzki, I wonder if he's related to Troy Tulowitzki. But you've got this kid. You got Patrick Bond. I mean, there's just so many unknowns with this team. I'm very curious what's going to happen. And is this going to hurt Jake Fromm more importantly? Because, sure, Georgia's probably going to have a good defense again. Sure, they've got Andrew Thomas at left tackle. But at the end of the day, is Jake Fromm going to take a step back as a quarterback because he doesn't have the receivers around him that are developed enough, like the 6 players that they sent to the draft last year, like Ridley, like Godwin, like Hardman, like the guys that I said. So what's your take on this? Do you see him possibly taking a step back from this? Am I wrong in thinking this, that he's been surrounded by good players from, Sony Michel, Nick Chubb, he's had Elijah Holyfield, and he has had DeAndre Swift. If you go to the NFL, look at Matthew Stafford. He's had to do so much on his own in Detroit. He's had 8, maybe 9 games where he's had a 100-yard rusher in his career. He's been there for 10 years. Are you going to be Matthew Stafford, who's not bad, or are you going to be, Aaron Rodgers? Are you going to be one of those guys? He's probably not going to be Aaron Rodgers. Sorry, Bulldogs fans. He's probably not.
No, you're definitely right. Yeah, I think we'll figure out fairly quickly. It's only natural that Jake Fromm probably takes a step back in production of giving everybody that he lost that you went over. I think the only thing that was left out was Lawrence Cager comes over from Miami. So that's a big get for them. I think he's the biggest winner out of all the departures from the pass catchers. Yeah. Lawrence Cager, I think his season was cut short or something last year, but now he's the grad transfer route, spent 3.5 years or so at Miami. So he's taking that next step into his career, and he's probably kind of underrated draft prospect at the moment. But I think naturally Jake Fromm takes a step back. Now, can you still take a step back in production, but still take a step forward as far as the NFL draft evaluation goes?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think we see that every year. Even though it's not it's not the sexy way to go. But I mean, you can but where Jake Fromm is being evaluated right now from a top 10 standpoint, statistical production is going to matter some. I'm not saying it's going to matter to us wholeheartedly, but it will take some factors because you want to see how he can produce without having, all-star caliber players and draft picks, like you said, of who we lost. So I think they are going to rely a lot on the run game, like Georgia and Kirby Smart do every single year. Yeah. But I think it is helpful, too, even though you pointed out Lamont Gilliard is gone from center, but 4 out of their 5 offensive linemen do return. So I think especially if you have that core, and like you talk about Andrew Thomas, who's potentially the best player in college football, but you have a couple other faces there that have had some consistency and some continuity as a group. So I think that's where it starts. You have that camaraderie there. You can go forward working with the receiving crew. But it is going to be, they play Vanderbilt week 1. And I'm not saying here, even Joejuan Williams is gone, a couple other pieces from Vanderbilt. But Derek Mason will have that Vanderbilt defense going. So I would not be surprised if you see a lot of – if Vanderbilt wants to blitz every play, I would not be surprised. And they have a lot of reliability in their secondary. So I think we could see really right off the bat how different Jake Fromm operates with having, I won't say lack thereof, but as of now having the lacking of that production from 2018 coming into this year. Because, frankly, we just do not know. And when you don't even know who that alpha receiver is going to be, and we did, and like you said, Holloman is no longer on the team, now you're really scratching your head going forward. Georgia doesn't leave the cupboard bare. They recruit very well. I mean, they're a top 5 recruiting class every single year, but experience matters going forward. So I think that's the biggest red flag going for Jake Fromm right now. But again, it definitely helps. Now, if we're talking about they only return maybe 2 guys up front and then nobody in the receiving category, then we have some problems. But It will be interesting. Maybe this is a good thing to see, hey, your true colors show with Jake Fromm going forward this year, seeing him maybe make a little more plays on his feet, and maybe calm down a little bit and be more of that leader going forward. So, again, like I said, I think it's natural that he takes a step back in production, but it's not impossible that he takes a step forward as far as evaluation goes.
Well, he's lucky he's got 4 offensive linemen coming back because despite having those 4 offensive linemen and Galliard up in the middle, he struggled against Florida reading the blitzes that they were showing. Boshan Joseph was just kind of doing whatever he wanted up the middle with his blitzes, and Jake Fromm was kind of like tucking the ball and just crouching and falling to the ground in the fetal position. So I'm just saying. But, look, I don't have any problems with him. I think he's a fine quarterback. He's not great by any means. He's not Tua. He's not Justin Herbert. But he does things well. And for example, just to calm the Georgia fans down, take a deep breath. At 7:26 against the Florida team that I'm talking about, he had a vertical throw on the money. I don't remember the receiver. I want to say it was Riley Ridley. It might have been Terry Godwin, but either way, he put the throw on the money. 944, he had a curl route. It was dropped. I understand he deals with drops. At 1750, though, he had a tight end, Isaac Nada, run a wheel route up the field. Guess what? Needs better ball placement because guess where it was? It was behind Nada, who he could have had in stride to the end zone running 4.940 speed that he has, surprisingly somehow, but instead it was behind him. So it'll be fun to see him throwing to Charlie Warner, their top receiver or tight end coming back with 11 receptions because that's the next guy on the list, their tight end with 11 receptions and 148 yards last year. So it'll be a lot of fun to see what happens with this Georgia team. I hope it works out for them because I root for pretty much any SEC team other than Alabama. And, of course, War Eagle. But I don't mind Georgia. Like, my favorite player in the NFL, he went to Georgia. Like, I like Georgia. It's not a big – like, it's not like I have a grudge against Jake Fromm and the Georgia Bulldogs. But anyways, speaking of quarterbacks and getting into this conversation of quarterbacks, it got me thinking here. I'm really curious about – and more times than not in the NFL draft, we see it all the time. Quarterbacks going first overall. Last year, Kyler Murray, of course. We've seen Jared Goff go first. I'm really curious, with the season approaching, who will have the first pick of the 2020 NFL draft? I've got some odds here for you, just to give you an idea what they're thinking. Okay. That's players. Well, that kind of screwed it all up. So I don't actually have odds for you. I have players, though, that can go first overall.
Okay.
We can go into that, but I really want to talk about the team who's going to be picking first overall. But the odds are being first in the 2020 NFL draft, it's Tua at plus 250, Justin Herbert at plus 350, Jake Fromm at plus 400, Chase Young at plus 700, your boy and my boy, Derek Brown, plus 700, and Jerry Jeudy, plus 700. These odds were from April 30th, so directly after the draft. So who's the team that's, you think, most likely right here, right now, on June 25th, 2019, who's picking first overall, and is there a potential player that you have in mind to go first overall right here, right now? The hottest take in summer.
Oh, the team's tough because, I know a lot of the odds were, Miami picking first, and that would most likely mean a quarterback because things maybe with Josh Rosen didn't work out. Cincinnati, now we have to address it real quick. Jonah Williams going to be sidelined for the rest of the season with a shoulder injury. That's not good news. Their first pick, who I pick 11, I believe, which I think both of us thought from a value perspective and a fit, that was one of the best picks. Not just the first round, but the entirety of the draft. So let's take Cincinnati for example, or New York. Let's take the New York Giants because this fills my narrative perfectly. All right, so we're going forward, and I think you said he was at plus 700. I think Jerry Jeudy is the best player in college football because his explosive attitude, his ability to take over the game. I don't care if he's 6'1", $190. But his ability to get in and out of breaks, he is essentially always open. I talked about those receivers being wide open for Tua on a consistent basis. Most of the time, it's Jerry Jeudy. I know they have a slew of NFL receivers, but Jerry Judy's the best one on the team. Gains separation right off his release, or if he's going to make plays, 15 yards downfield, it's really 1 foot in the ground, and then he's cut and he's wide open. He can go get the jump ball. He can threaten you down the field. He can beat you in the red zone. He can be physical. A pretty decent blocker as well. I think Jerry Jeudy is the most explosive player in football, and I think he's the best player in college football right now. Now, this is subject to change because I think he's going to get a lot of attention again this year for Alabama. It's going to open up opportunities for, his supporting cast, Henry Ruggs, a lot of Jalen Waddle, a lot of different players, a lot of playmakers for Alabama. Like kind of talking about Jake Fromm, even though your production can dip, I think you can still take one step forward as far as the evaluation process goes. So right now, I'll take the New York Giants at first overall. Dave Gettleman's out of there. Even though it makes no sense really to pick a wide receiver first overall, but when you already have your quarterback, you have your running back, let's just get the whole triangle of offense and let's get our main wide receiver with Jerry Jeudy.
As fun as it would be to see Jerry Jeudy in New York, I know that sounds weird, but like Daniel Jones and him would actually probably be a lot of fun. I almost picked New York. I really did. But I thought they had a decent draft, and they got 2 players in the first round that I think can play for them right away, and Dexter Lawrence and DeAndre Baker. The team I'm going to go with, is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I wrote about this in This Week in Scouting. I'm going with Tampa Bay. For some reason, I cannot find it's just gone. I can't find the odds anymore of the teams that are going potential first overall that Vegas thinks. But Tampa Bay, I think the Giants were like the third favorite, and I think Tampa Bay was like the fourth favorite. So like they're right on top of each other with whoever's going to be going first overall. But I like Tampa Bay because I know that they've got Bruce Arians there, but let's say he uses this year to kind of shake off the rust and see what his team is like. And then you've got a player like Jameis Winston, who's been so up and down for them, has a lot of promise, but is entering a contract year, which could be a good thing, but ultimately it could be a bad thing, and it would be a good thing for Tampa Bay because I don't think he's the long-term answer there. They did lose some players on defense. I think their defensive identity has been missing for a long time. I think it's going to be even worse now that Quan Alexander is gone. I know they got Devin White, and they lost Gerald McCoy, which might be a good thing according to some people, but overall, they drafted 4 defensive players within the first 100 selections of the draft. 3 of them are defensive backs, and we all know defensive back takes, a year, maybe 2 years to really get going, depending on the round and depending on the player. So they've got a good core of guys, but overall, Ronald Jones still a big question mark. And again, Jameis Winston circles back to him. He's got to stop licking his fingers, and he's got to start playing football the right way. And I just don't know if he's going to. I don't know if Bruce is going to be the guy that gets it out of him. And with that, I think that's going to be the team that we talk about taking quarterback with the first overall pick. And maybe it ends up being second or third overall pick in that draft. But it wouldn't be surprising to me if we saw Tua go first overall to the Tampa Bay Bucs. That's my guess if I'm going. But I love what you said as far as Jerry Jeudy goes and everything else. But let's wrap this up. Summer scouting pieces, we've been doing them. I talked about A.J. Dillon this past week, Keyshawn Vaughn, Zach Shackelford. We've been doing a ton of work as well. What's on the docket, and is there maybe a player or two really caught your eye?
Yeah, real quick, I'll go over who I just covered recently. Alton Robinson, defensive end out of Syracuse, 6'4", 260. I'm just going to read over my numbers real quick. He is a stud. And it kind of reminds me, and I'm going to say this probably over and over again, I don't think he's going to be a top 10 pick, but he reminds me of the Josh Allen ascension, where this is in 2017, Josh Allen, he had the makeup of becoming an elite pass rusher. I think you can go that far in the SEC, but there's some little things he had to work on. I think Robinson's in that same boat. Allen corrected his and became a top 10 pick, a really good value pick for Jacksonville going forward. I think if Robinson can tune up a little things, and I'll get to those in just a second, I think you could look at him taking that giant leap forward because he's getting it done on the production level, so you don't have to worry about that. But I think just kind of the intricacies of being that elite explosive pass rusher is some things he has to work on. So a couple things I got. He has an A-plus get off an initial burst, goes to work quickly, getting depth on the offensive tackle within a split second. I have a picture I put on Twitter against Boston College where he's literally 3 yards into the backfield already before the Boston College quarterback even finishes his first drop. So he definitely has that explosive get off, which you really like to see. He showcases a lot of flexibility. He has that flexibility to bend the edge and dip under pressure. Speaking of, things I posted on Twitter, there's a clip against Wake Forest where he's lining up against the right tackle and he bends literally right underneath them, showcases a little bit of a rip-through move, and goes to work and gets onto the quarterback pressure. He has really good feet, quick, swift feet, can bounce around potential contact. He can really make offensive tackles look silly just playing the guessing game because, a lot of times, you want your offensive tackle, you want them to be grabbers more than huggers, meaning you don't want them to really bring in the contact. You want them to initiate the contact. He knows that, and he makes them look like fools. So it's really fun to see of him just bending around contact, a lot of with his really good athletic feet, really good acceleration. So kind of going that, he has really good change of direction skills and his acceleration, his ability to get to point A to point B quickly. He has the ability to convert power to speed and then vice versa, speed to power. I think one thing he has to work on is maybe just his overall, ability to rush the passer. His routes, when he gets that outside edge, he does kind of take a while to get to the quarterback. Fortunately, some of the quarterbacks he played against in the ACC were not aware of certain pressure situations. So instead of moving up in the pocket, of course, like any young quarterback, they move back in the pocket thinking they're athletic enough and they're back in their high school days, and they can avoid it. Of course, that helps heighten his production. So if he can sit there and kind of tighten his path up a little bit and then work on some of the pass rushing tools. You'd like to see maybe more of a swim move initiated. He does a lot. He really relies a lot on his athleticism right now, which is fine. Similar again to like Josh Allen was in 2017. But if you sit there and hone your craft, I think going forward, Alton Robinson could be one of the biggest risers going forward in the college football season. And then real quick, I'll mention one guy that just started watching today, kind of give a little bit of a teaser. Marvin Wilson, did nose tackle for Florida State, 6'5", 315, really solid. He has 0 tech nose tackle with production, 3.5 sacks, handful of quarterback hurries. He has a lot of pass rushing ability inside. Like I said, the 3.5 sacks from a nose tackle, it's almost unheard of. He's really he's a solid athlete, balanced through contact. A lot of acceleration, explodes through that contact as well. So kind of a teaser there. He's not a surprise. He's one of the top players in high school when he came out in his recruiting class. But he's a guy that I'm focusing on and expect a piece on him at cover1.net here soon.
I am looking forward to it. Of course, you guys, like I mentioned earlier in the broadcast, you guys can do the same. Get the Cover One app. It's for free. Search it on your app store, Google Play, however you go about your business. Or, of course, follow Christian on Twitter @_Christian Page, Page. The one guy I've got, of course, I talked about a couple of guys in This Week in Scouting, and we talked about a couple of players already today, but Tyler Johnson, wide receiver from Minnesota, 6'2", 200. He's a senior. Hopefully
he's a highlight tape. My God.
He is unbelievable. We talk about players that are explosive. He might not be as an explosive athlete as CeeDee Lamb or Jerry Jeudy or maybe even Devin Duvernay, who I also talked about this week as well. But when the ball is in his hands, he shoots out of a cannon almost every single time. Like, his ability to explode after the catch is incredible. And it's like he's got Golden Tate. Like, I don't do this. I promise you I don't do this, and we know this.
You say that a lot, but you keep doing it.
It's fun, though. It's freaking fun, okay? It's like Golden Tate explosiveness after the catch, but he runs routes like freaking Stephon Diggs, man. Like, every time I watch him, that's the vibe I get. But very, very good in the intermediate routes, in the short areas of the field. He had 78 receptions for almost 1,200 yards and 12 touchdowns this past year. He really understands the nuance and the attention to detail needed to be a successful route runner at the next level. I hope the production side, and this, again, could be a guy that takes a step back on the production side, but like we've talked about, as long as the tape checks out, he'll be fine, and it very well could. So he's certainly a guy that I think when we talk about top 5 receivers, I think he'll be a guy that we talk about quite a bit. I'm excited to continue to dive into his film. I hope we talk about him more in the podcast. I'm sure we will. Of course, you guys can check him out with my recent piece This Week in Scouting. I talked briefly about him, and I'm sure the both of us will be writing stuff on him during the year or putting video stuff on Twitter, which, of course, like I mentioned, you can smash the follow button @RussNFLDraft or @_Christian Page, Page. So, CP, that's all we've got today. Thank you, my man, for joining me for 104 on the podcast. Until next week, hopefully, we'll be back in this thing, even though next week is the holiday for 4th of July. So if we don't see you next week, have a great 4th of July. Until then, this is Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast.